Welcome back to the bio session. Today we are going to discuss the main points related to the topic control and coordination part 1. In animals, including mammals, there are two types of information transfer that are used to coordinate the body's activities. As we know, nervous system and endocrine system. Nerves that transmit information in the form of electrical impulses, that is nervous system. Chemical messengers called hormones that travel in the blood, endocrine system. Nervous communication. The mammalian nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord, which form the central nervous system, and the cranial and spinal nerves, which form the peripheral nervous system. That means nervous system consists of two systems, central nervous system CNS and peripheral nervous system PNS. Cranial nerves are attached to the brain and spinal nerves to the spinal cord. Information is transferred in the form of nerve impulses which travel along nerve cells at very high speeds. Nerve cells are also known as neurons and they carry information directly to their target cells. Neurons coordinate the activities of sensory receptors such as those in the eye, decision-making centers in the central nervous system, and effectors such as muscles and glands. Nerve cells are also known as neurons. They carry information directly to their target cells. These neurons are of three types: sensory neuron, intermediate neuron, and motor neurons. Sensory neurons transmit impulses from receptors to the central nervous system. Intermediate neurons transmit impulses from sensory neurons to motor neurons. Motor neurons transmit impulses from central nervous system to effectors. Structure of a mammalian neuron. Look at this diagram. You can notice nucleus, dendrite, axon, myelin sheath, node of Renway, axon, axon terminal button. Focus this diagram well. Now we are going to discuss its structure. Motor neuron, which transmit impulses from the brain or spinal cord to a muscle or gland, that is effector. The cell body of a motor neuron lies within the spinal cord or brain. The nucleus of a neuron is always in its cell body. Often dark specks can be seen in the cytoplasm. These are small regions of rough endoplasmic reticulum that synthesize proteins. Thin cytoplasmic processes extend from the cell body. Some are very short and often have many branches. These are dendrites. A motor neuron has many highly branched dendrites to give a large surface area for the endings of other neurons. Remember, this highly branched dendrites, they provide large surface area for the endings of other neurons. The axon is much longer and conducts impulses over long distances. Within the cytoplasm of an axon, there are some organelles such as mitochondria. The ends of the branches of the axon have large numbers of mitochondria together with many vesicles containing chemicals. These chemicals are called transmitter substances. These vesicles are involved in passing impulses to an effector cell such as a muscle cell or a gland. Points to focus. A sensory neuron has the same basic structure as a motor neuron, but it has one long axon with a cell body that may be near the source of stimuli or in swelling of a spinal nerve known as a ganglion. relay neurons are found entirely within the central nervous system. Myelin. The axons of motor and sensory neurons are protected within nerves. Some of these are surrounded by thick dark rings. This darkly stained material is myelin. Myelin is made by specialized cells, Schwann cells. The small uncovered areas of axon between Schwann cells are called knots of Renway. Move to the next topic, reflex arc. Reflex arc is the pathway along which impulses are transmitted from a receptor to an effector without involving conscious regions of the brain. That means without your knowledge, action will take place. There are 5 steps. Step 1, arrival of stimulus and activation of receptor. Look at this diagram. A one nail touch on your palm. Step 2, activation of a sensory neuron. Step 3, this information processing in central nervous system. Step 4, activation of a motor neuron, and that impulses will carry motor neuron, then the response by effector. That means withdrawal of your hand. How neurons work together? There are 5 steps in a reflex arc. Step 1, a receptor senses specific type of internal or external change. Step 2, that is sensory neuron that transmit nerve impulses from receptor into brain or spinal cord. Interneuron conducts nerve impulses from sensory neuron to motor neuron. Fourth stage, motor neuron transmit nerve impulses from brain or spinal cord out to the effector. And the fifth stage, effector, muscle or gland that respond to the stimulation by the motor neuron and produces a reflex, that is a behavior reaction. Transmission of nerve impulses. Neurons transmit electrical impulses. These impulses travel very rapidly along the cell surface membrane from one end of the cell to the other and are not a flow of electrons like an electric current. The nerve impulses from one neuron to the another neuron. The signals are very brief changes in the distribution of electric charge across the cell surface membrane, that is called a action potential. Remember this term, action potential. The signals are very brief changes in the distribution of electrical charge across the cell surface membrane called action potentials. Normally these action potentials caused by the rapid movement of sodium and potassium ions into and out of the axon. Sodium ions will move out and potassium ions will move into the axon. This movement, this rapid movement is the main cause for action potential. Now, resting potential. Some axons in animals like earthworms are unmyelinated and very wide. The difference in electrical potential between 2 points in the nervous system between the inside and outside of a cell surface membrane, such as the membrane that encloses an axon. This is termed as potential difference. Resting potential means the difference in electrical potential that is maintained across the cell surface membrane of a neuron when it is not transmitting an action potential. The resting potential is produced and maintained by sodium and potassium pumps in the cell surface membrane. Action potential. Certain terms that related to action potential are the first term, depolarization. The reversal of the resting potential across the cell surface membrane of a neuron or muscle cell so that the inside becomes positively charged compared with the outside. There are two terms are there. One is depolarization. There will be another term will come almost similar, repolarization. So never confused with these two terms. Second term, threshold potential. The critical potential difference across the cell surface membrane of a sensory receptor or neuron, which must be reached before an action potential is initiated. In this slide, we discussed about depolarization. Here, repolarization. Returning the potential difference across the cell surface membrane of a neuron or muscle cell to normal following the depolarization of an action potential. Next term is a refractory period. It is important. A period of time during which a neuron is recovering from an action potential and during which another action potential cannot be regenerated. That means this refractory period means action potential are discrete events. They do not merge into one another. There is minimum time between action potentials occurring at one place on a neuron. The length of the refractory period determines the maximum frequency at which impulses are transmitted along neurons. For many neurons, this is between 200 and 300 impulses per second. The impulse can only travel in one direction along the neuron. Thanks for watching.